Hello everybody, my name is Julian from Flow Studio and this is another dev diary for Lens Island. So to this week we worked on an actual main menu and a loading screen. It's been on the to-do list for a long time, but I've got lots to show you this week. We'll have a guest appearance from Daniel, the artist who's been making a beautiful splash image and some icons and everything. I'll show you a little bit of the dungeons and then some more about the building and some other aspects and some new additions to the building and decorations later on. But this is our main menu. You can see we've got our social links down the bottom, sort of reacts to the mouse and moves, and then it goes down to the ground for the loading screen, which is that really quick loading screen because there's not much to load at the moment. And that's loaded me into the demo scene that we have for our Kickstarter backers at the moment. But look, let's go over the dungeons quickly. I'm going to show you what we have ready for the demo dungeons, which will be a spoiler for everyone watching who has access to the demo right now. And you'll be able to hear some of the music down the dungeon, some work in progress tracks as well. So welcome to the dungeons and caves. For anyone wondering, the dungeons and caves are all one thing. The cave areas are just called caves because they're sort of the more natural areas that you'll see in a second that you mine and sort of explore. The dungeons are typically where they're a bit more the developed regions and also where there's more creatures and monsters to fight. So the area I'm in right now, this would be a dungeon area. But technically the whole thing's just one giant dungeon or cave or whatever you'd like to call it. So this is just, I guess, a sample because this is for the demo. So this is, if you don't know what the demo is all about, people who backed us on Kickstarter have access to the demo and they can sort of get early sneak peeks of the game and sort of get an idea of what it's about in a little mini version of the game. And just quickly, you can't build in the dungeon, but there will be access to all these little sort of abandoned houses, and you'll be able to actually go into these houses and loot them, and there'll be all sorts of stuff to check out and explore. There will be lots of upgradable objects too, like this bridge here. You'll be able to repair this with the right materials and sort of gain access to new areas to mine. So here I'm sort of walking into more of a natural cave area where there'll be resource nodes all around to be able to mine and get stone and crystal and iron and all sorts of things to be able to upgrade your weapons and build better houses and all sorts of stuff. But I'm going to give you a sort of a tour of these dungeon cave areas now. And basically to show you some of the white boxing, I guess, we have ready for the demo. This is far from finished, and the real dungeons and caves in the game will look a lot more detailed, and they will be considerably bigger than this. Like, this is sort of 1% of the actual caves in the game. So I'm just going to walk around for a little bit, and then I'm going to play some sample tracks of some audio that Lars has prepared for the dungeons. These are just work in progress tracks. They're very early stages, but they're just a couple of different sort of moods to give you a feel of what it could feel like or sound like to run around the caves or fight enemies or sort of encounter some enemies or whatever it may be. So I'll let you listen to them for a little bit now. So hopefully you can get a feel for what those tracks could sort of feel like when you're actually playing the game. I absolutely love them. I love the way the audio is progressing for Lens Island. It's going to feel really, really immersive and awesome once you're in it. But I'm going to quickly show you another aspect of the dungeons, and these are the corrupt zones. You can see it's starting to get very, very dark, so you definitely need your torch for these zones. And it looks a lot more gooey and dark and sort of claustrophobic and just sort of a grosser, darker, more evil place to be in. So there's going to be various, I guess, zones in the dungeons or the caves, and there's going to be parts which are sort of what we call the corrupt zone. This is like a work in progress term that we use as developers. And this is where the sort of the darkness and the evil creatures have really taken over. These are going to be the hardest parts in the game to get through, where some of the sort of the worst, I guess, most terrifying creatures are in. Not so terrifying, but more hard. These zones are going to be hard, and they're really, really dark. You can't see much, and you can see they've got a very different aesthetic. Obviously, this is really, really basic, just sort sort of white boxing out areas, but this could be a potential sort of boss fight where there's a bit of a sort of plateau here that you can sort of run around and fight a boss and do all sorts. But they look really cool. I love the general aesthetic of these zones so far. I think they are just such a big contrast to the above world, nice, beautiful lighting, forest, calming sort of feel to this. It's really cool, the dynamic sort of features of it. So anyway, I'm going to hand it over to Daniel. He's going to show you a bunch of art he's been working on, and then I'm going to show you some building features after that.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel and I've been working on some of the 2D icons for Lens Island and also this splash illustration for the game, which I'm super excited to share with you guys. So the first thing is whenever I get a brief, I think about ideas and try and brainstorm as much as I can. So it might be tempting to start drawing straight away, but I've often found that the most success comes from pointing myself in a direction first and thinking about what the client needs and how I can best achieve that. So, in particular for this splash illustration, Julian wanted me to include 4 of the main pillars of Lens Island in my designs, and they were combat, building, farming, and exploration. So with that in mind, I started sketching a few loose compositions to see where we could take it, and these are very, very loose, almost abstract, but it's a way for me to think about the composition very, very early on without getting lost in any kind of details. Composition is very important because it determines a few things, such as the kind of perspective you're going to be using for the rest of the illustration, as well as the horizon line and placement of certain key elements within the scene. So after some back and forth, we decided that placing Len in the middle of the frame, overlooking an ocean, was the most effective way of capturing the feeling of the game, and that's also by having the 4 pillars I mentioned earlier be on his left and right. So for example, you can see we've included farming on the left, building on the right, there's a merchant ship in the further left, and then in the further right, there is a spooky, mysterious cave, and that was supposed to allude to the exploration side of things in the game. And once I've established all of that, I'll go ahead and do some basic value passes to establish some kind of visual hierarchy. If you guys don't know what that is, a visual hierarchy is essentially your most important elements within the scene, following some kind of order. So for example, in this illustration, Len was always going to be the main focal point, and through the composition and leading lines and that sort of thing, a lot of shapes point towards him being in the middle of the frame. And then some of the secondary focal points will be, like I mentioned, the building, the farm, the ship, etc. And then from that, you have all the extra little details like the trees and the rocks and some of the resources that you might be finding in the game. They are still important to tell the story, but they're not as important as certain things. And once I've established the black and white, the values and everything like that, how I want the image to feel, I'll go ahead and add color on top of that. So I'm breaking down each stage of the illustration in very small, manageable chunks. That way I don't have to deal with everything at once. And I tried a somewhat new approach for this illustration. So I took my basic color comp that I painted, brought that into a new document, made the resolution bigger, and painted directly on top of that instead of starting completely from scratch. In the past, I would take my color comps and have that as a reference and redraw it and try and paint it again. And I've often found that I end up losing some kind of quality or character that I captured in the original comp. So in this one, I wanted to paint directly on top of it and see how it would turn out. And I think that the advantage of starting this way is that the canvas is essentially filled up. It's just our job now to begin cleaning it up and establishing some kind of structure within our layers and all that kind of stuff. And from there, it's just a matter of painting and painting and painting many, many hours later. So I also redesigned some of the resource and farming icons that were already in the game. And this bit was actually pretty straightforward. So I had Julian's designs at the top, and essentially all I did was just made them a little bit more stylized, had a little bit more saturation. He also had a couple of new icons that he wanted me to add. And we talked a lot about the direction they should go in. And so once I had that information, just went ahead, sketched them out, as you can see here. Once I had the shapes down and the kind of feeling and composition and all that kind of stuff, thinking mainly about the silhouette in this case. Because they are icons, they will be appearing pretty small to the player. So if they're readable from this distance, then I know I'm doing my job. And from there, just painting, doing all the different colors and that kind of thing, and trying to get the materials to feel like what they're representative of. I also did some of the farming icons, as you can see, a couple of new ones here, wheat and the happy sapling, which was fun to work on. And it's, again, just the same kind of process. And that was a very brief overview of some of the work that I've done on Lens Island. And if you guys want to check out more of my work, you can follow me on Instagram at DanielAngArt for more updates and anything like that. If you also have any questions, please feel free to DM me and I'd love to help you guys out. Thanks.
And time to show you some buildings. So this is all the new, I guess, interaction objects and decoration objects that you'll be able to place throughout your house. There's a whole bunch to go through. We've got a little campfire here. So there will be campfires and fireplaces as well. The campfires you won't be able to place, they'll be scattered throughout the world, but the fireplace at the end will. So we've got a pantry, a wardrobe. Those aren't interactable yet. We also have a refinery, which I need to make the UI menus for those still. Then we have the weapon rack, which is a sort of draft UI done here. There's all the different pages of your different weapons. So once you unlock a weapon in the game, you don't have to sort of put it in a chest or anything. It automatically gets stored across all of your weapon racks, and then you can access it here. So there'll be a library of all of your unlocked weapons. Then you can choose to equip them. You can look at all the information, all that sort of stuff, and you can also display them as well. So you can just click and drag them in your hotbar if you want to equip it, or you can hit the display button, and then you actually have 3 slots to be able to display your favorite weapons, but then you'd be able to directly equip those weapons from that display rack too. So it would bring up that same little sort of UI window that when you hover over the weapons here, if I click on, let's say we'll click on the axe here, and then we bring up the UI, see that little window there? That would come up if you directly hover over that weapon in the display rack. So the display rack's a nice way to show off your weapons, but also really quickly change out your loadouts as well. And then we have the fireplace at the end here, which you'll be able to sort of passively heal your character at. And then, yeah, here's a bunch more decoration assets. So we've got some new rugs, there's bookcases and chairs and lights and all sorts of stuff. So these are all things that don't really have any use, or besides the gramophone actually. So this is actually a bit more of an interactable item that should be up with the top sort of row. If I turn up my music here, you can see we can use this to actually change music tracks and sort of play various tracks. So you can see a little song starts to play here, or we can skip it to another one. And yeah, the gramophone is just really cool because I guess if there's any specific songs, sort of it's part of the official soundtrack that you like in Lens Island, you can place one of these down and actually play your favorite songs in the background, or just turn off the music and skip through them all. But yeah, here's all the rest of the decoration sort of items. These are what we will sort of include at launch, but there will be lots more decoration items once the game's launched. So we've sort of made the building system in this game work in such a way that we can just constantly add more building styles, we can constantly add more items and decorations. So hopefully, 6 months, a year after launch, we would have just a plethora of all these different building parts and decoration items, and it will be like a really in-depth system. But I'm going to show you a couple of the new building objects now. So we've got hatches, ladders, balconies, bay windows, and half railings. So I think it's around 5 objects. They're not all fully working yet, but they are in for all the new styles. So we've got sort of stone and ornate versions of them all. But I'll quickly just build a little house here, and I'll just sort of skip through building this house and actually show you what some of these items actually look like once they're built in the game. So look, here's a little house here. We've got some bay windows, so that's what they sort of look like. It makes a really cool way to sort of make towers and things. You can make a lighthouse or a tower, or make sort of like a fortress looking thing. I think it might be a bit easier if we go into screenshot mode here. So that's the balconies on top of the bay windows. The balconies can snap to the edge of any ceiling, or it can also snap to the top of a bay window itself. So it adds in a lot of sort of customization and I guess creativity when it comes to building, adding in a couple of these sort of extra little parts. There's also hatches and ladders. The hatches and ladders aren't fully working yet, but they'll basically be able to stack on top of each other, and instead of having staircases, you'll be able to just sort of climb up a ladder to get from level to level. I think the screenshot mode is really good for showing all of this building stuff. It looks really janky right now, so just take my word for it that we're in the middle of adding all this stuff, but I sort of just wanted to show you while we're adding it, just so you can actually see what some of these items look like. I think the stone and ornate varieties of the balconies and bay windows look really nice, so I'm excited to show you this all completely once it's in and working. So that wraps it up for today's Dev Diary. I hope you all enjoyed. If you have any ideas or anything in the comments, be sure to let me know, as always. And as always again, make sure to have an amazing day, everybody. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.